Has Rod Roddenberry just told us on a Shuttle Pod show exactly what's wrong with Star Trek, but why we should be hopeful for the future? Welcome to SciTrek, your sci-fi TV and movie channel. In 2016, while Secret Hideout was developing the new Star Trek show for Paramount and CBS Studios, Rod Roddenberry was approached to executive produce. At the time, he had Roddenberry Entertainment and had actually worked on previous Star Trek shows earlier. Obviously, Rod Roddenberry is Gene Roddenberry's son. I probably should mention that earlier, or this is going to be very confusing for you. And after seeing him do this interview on the Shuttle Pod show, to be fair, the first interview I've ever really seen him do, I have to say that he really does seem to be trying to stand up for what his dad set out. He is the gatekeeper of Star Trek. I actually think if he had a little bit more power, we might have a better Star Trek show.
I do what I'm able to do. So we're certainly apart. We have a seat at the table. We share usually when things, we kind of save it for when things are grossly missed.
Not Trek.
Not Trek.
He actually talked in the video about how there are a lot of people that are involved in the creation of Star Trek, and they try to withhold their input unless they really, really have to. He talks about here about how we would only step in when something really isn't Trek, when something really goes against what his dad would have believed in. Now, I'm hoping that they kind of have a veto. That would be great. If they could, sparingly, of course, because, you know, it's still a business, there's still a team, go in and go, no, yellow card, red card, that isn't Star Trek. Come on, we need to change this. That is kind of what he's hinting at. But he also does hint that actually they don't have that much power in the game, that there are people there that are the main creators, the showrunners, but that they can step in when needed. There does seem to be that respect there very early on from Paramount that actually having Rod Roddenberry at the table is worthwhile. But is it? Or is it just a little bit of fan service again? Paramount has shown repeatedly through Secret Hideout that they are more than willing to use a bit of fan service to get what they want. They know Star Trek is a very beloved franchise, and they also know that it's quite divided. So what do you do very early on to try to get the fans on board? Get Rod Roddenberry's name attached. Now, hopefully, you give them a bit of power so that you actually get something that is Star Trek at the end of it. Hopefully, the Roddenberry DNA will come through. Is that what's happening, though? Well, the cynic part of me thinks he's probably only really there as a mouthpiece, and that he probably really doesn't have that much power. And that if he did, maybe particularly the early parts of Star Trek and Discovery would have been very different.
But the people who work on it are now more, there are more fans working on the shows, people who truly like Star Trek.
Here he's saying about how there's a lot of fans that actually make Star Trek. I don't think he's really referring particularly to Terry Matalas. How Terry Matalas came in and made Picard Season 3, and he is a Star Trek fan. He desperately wanted to do Picard Season 3 and got his wish. And if Paramount want him, he'll be back to do Legacy, I imagine, anytime they like. But the way he says it does make it sound like perhaps there weren't so many Star Trek fans there before.
In fact, I would say everyone who works on the current shows, as they did back then, love the shows. But there are the bean counters, so to speak, who need to make money.
Now, he talks about the bean counters. Now, that does make sense. So there are going to be people there that are watching the pennies, that are saying, look, our viewing figures are this, our budget is this, these two things need to marry up. We cannot spend $100 million on a season if only a couple of million people are watching it. We just can't. It makes no sense. We can't do it. But there are enough people there now that are fans of the show that want to make Star Trek. Now, I think that means there weren't as many fans there before. Now, that might be an underhanded jibe at Kurtzman or people around that. I don't want to put words in his mouth. But it does seem quite clear by saying that there are more fans of the show now that there were less before. And that maybe, even though that's a good thing going forwards, it does explain a few of the problems going backwards.
First of all, there were 5 shows out, and they're all very different. If you're getting into Star Trek and you don't know which one, the good news is we got 5 different shows, or at least we did. And if you don't like one, try another. If you don't like one, try another. But the people who work on it are now more. There are more fans working on the shows. People who truly like Star Trek.
A big problem with Star Trek is this attitude that there are 5 TV shows, so that if you don't like one, you can just go and watch another. I understand the logic of that, but that's not how it should be. That feels like you're settling. Now, I've always argued that Paramount makes Star Trek for a wide audience. I think their plan very early on was to make a show for this audience, a show for that demographic, and a show for this gender or whatever. That you actually have shows that are targeted at those different demographics. Why not just target it at sci-fi fans? Why not just target it at Star Trek fans? I don't know about you, but if you're a Trekkie, I have quite a broad taste in sort of TV. Similarly to music, I'm mostly a rock fan. I love rock music. I love the Foo Fighters. I love all that sort of thing. I love indie music. But I will occasionally listen to a dance song. I will occasionally a pop song will hit me and I'll go, oh my God, that's a really catchy tune. I love it. I really like listening to country music, weirdly. I have a wide base of interests. Star Trek could have 5 different types of show, but still be Star Trek and still be a show I can watch. I have desperately tried to watch Discovery season 4. I promised actually Mark from the Shuttle Pod show that I would, and I can't. It's awful. I don't like it. I just feel like I'm burning my own time away. It's a bad show. And to be honest, even though it was better than the first season, the 4th season is still a bad show. I really like Strange New Worlds. I love Lower Decks. I love Prodigy, actually. And I loved the 3rd season of Picard. I didn't like the 1st or 2nd. But it shouldn't be that difficult to make 5 different types of show that can still appeal to me as a Trekkie, because you could make subtly different types of show, but they don't. They really do point shows specifically at certain demographics, like a younger audience or what they think a younger audience are like. And then Picard season 3 directly at Trekkies. And then I don't know whatever they did with Lower Decks and Prodigy at children for some reason. I don't know why they did that. And, they do this in a way to try to scattershot the entire audience. It doesn't work. Don't do it. So, no, I don't agree with Rod there. It isn't you pick and choose the Star Trek for you. This is Star Trek. It should be for all of us.
Need to make money. Mm-hmm. So do you do a show with talking heads or do you do a show with action?
Sure.
And you've got to find that balance because you are doing Star Trek. I mean, and that's where I draw the line is Star Trek is its own thing and needs to be something that's thoughtful and provocative and hopefully at the end gets you to consider, hopefully if it's done right, a different point of view.
I actually think he's diplomatically and very carefully saying what a lot of us think about Star Trek at the moment. That, yeah, actually, this was made by people that didn't really understand what Star Trek was initially and that maybe weren't fans. They brought Roddenberry in, I think, definitely probably at first just because of his name. And then he stuck around and probably earned his due. He now gets to actually jump in and say when things aren't right. I doubt, this is just my opinion, but I doubt he had that much power initially. By his own words, he says they're very careful about that. That seems to me to say that he knows his position is as a lower partner, that he doesn't have the authority to step in and go, no. So when he does, he has to make sure it's the battle worth fighting. Maybe if they gave him a little bit more authority, we'd get less crap. And it would seem to me as well that he feels Star Trek is actually going in the right direction. We're bringing in the right people. Something else I think us Trekkie fans are noticing. Star Trek is going into a slightly rocky future. Sci-fi is expensive and the audiences aren't as big as a lot of the production companies would like. We've maybe seen a golden age of Star Trek again, and I'm just hoping that the producers over at Secret Hideout didn't waste that opportunity, because there's going to be less money in future, less Star Trek. But actually, if it's made by people that genuinely love it, like Rod and Terry Matalas and other people like that, then they don't need to spend that much money to create a TV show that Trekkies and others can really fall in love with. We don't need constant CGI spinning starships. We need a bit. I love a space battle. We need a bit. But we don't need 2 or 3 minutes of that every single episode. We watch it because of the characters. We watch it because of the adventures. We watch it because of the science fiction. If they could get back to that a little bit, they could do it for much less money. And maybe if they listen to people like Rod a little bit more, we'd get better sci-fi. So please, guys, go and watch the Shuttle Pod show. There is a link in the description for the full video. If you really want to get a feel for what Gene Roddenberry was like, but also what Rod, his kid, is like, and the influence he brings to the show, it's a really fascinating interview. Now, I've got a little bit after the credits here that I want to show you about why I think you should go and watch the Shuttle Pod show. Not just because of the great guests they have, but because of these two main guys. Yes, they appeared in Star Trek. Yes, they were just actors when they went in. But they fell in love with not just the show, but the philosophy. This is why I love the Shuttle Pod show, and it's why I love Star Trek. Give it a watch. And go and subscribe to the Shuttle Pod show.
This is a conversation, right? I'm allowed to ask you guys questions.
Absolutely.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, good. Because I feel like it's
No,
anyhow,
yeah,
okay.
you go.
Well, so I mean, you guys and your experience with Star, I'm always curious. People who, what were your thoughts before you entered the Star Trek universe, during, and more so now after? I mean, you've had a number of years. You've worked on the show. I'd love to know from each of you, if you don't mind, what were your thoughts initially? You got
I initially didn't have any. And I still
Why am I not surprised by
and I
that?
still seldom do. I grew up, my brother.
What do you feel about dog food?
It's great. You know, I grew up like most kids with the reruns
They should eat it.
of the original series and would watch it go, you know, after
Your brother was a
school.
huge fan.
My brother was a massive fan, and he and his buddies would walk around the perimeter of the school ground at lunchtime talking about the previous day's episode. Now, my brother and I very close, but very different, and so that was his thing.
Mhm.
And then when I got the show, I got Enterprise.
Yeah, he must have been really pissed or jealous.
Well, he tells a
The
story.
funny
rather
thing is
amusing.
that so I get the job, and
For those of you who've
first-
heard it before a couple of
yeah.
times, sorry, but it is
sorry,
funny.
the first
I'd love to
person I
hear it.
call is my brother,
Yeah.
who has like a 1 and a 3-year-old at home,
Yeah.
and he's by himself. His wife's teaching, and I call him up, and I'm like, Matt,
You'll
you're
never
never going to
guess.
believe this. I just got cast in the new Star Trek. Lily, Ruby, stop touching her cereal. You guys, I got to go.
That was the reaction.
That was it. And I was like, oh,
Huh.
Did
wow.
he hear you?
Yeah.
I'm not, he
Not
called me back
really.
later and he was thrilled for me. But at the moment,
Oh.
it was kind of like, you know,
Yeah.
real life got in the way.
Right. Yeah.
I thought he'd be a bit more chuffed.
That
But I
happens.
will say that, you know, once the show started, I didn't go out into the convention world. And that's really how I found the language and the legacy of what it all is and the community.
Yeah.
I was terrified to do it. Dom went out early,
I did.
and
First one out.
it
Yeah.
took a couple
Seen
of
that Trekkies movie, and I was like,
Oh,
oh,
boy.
yeah.
yeah,
There's an annuity here.
right.
But frightened beyond belief.
I
Until you meet the love.
remember it taking a couple of years for me, and really what it came down to is the conversations I would have at the table with people who'd walk up and say, I'm an engineer
Mm-hmm.
because of your character.
Yeah.
You got me through a really difficult time in my life. I would wait for every, whatever it was for us, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, depending on what day it
Well,
was.
they pushed us
Yeah.
around.
But I would, you know, I was going through a very dark time, and all I looked forward to was getting through this week to watch the next episode. And those
particularly
things,
Dominic Keating is some.
I hope Dominic's in this one. I found myself, you know, really humbled by what I'd gotten myself into, and awfully proud of it.
Yeah.
And you know, honoring.
And a little bit after the fact. I don't want to say
That's what-
completely, but a little bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, initially it was a gig.
Yeah.
And the greatest
Yeah,
gig in
and
the
a
world
really
because
good
it was like this wasn't a pilot.
We
Yeah.
thought we were get. We
This
thought
was a
we
show.
Were sure, we
Yeah.
were
You
shooing
know.
for 7 years.
Right.
Yeah.
My agent
Yeah.
said like,
Little
no,
did we
you're
know
doing
that,
the first
you know,
episode
Things was
of your
changing.
show.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that was just, again, that was like the golden ring that year of shows to get. But again, to your point, yeah, it took a couple of years, and it took the connection to the people who really, really care about it to then that then bled into me.
The love.
And I began to feel the exact same way. And the longer I've gone away from having done the show, the more impactful it is for me.
As the years have gone by, it deepens and deepens.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I often say it's the fans who brought me into Star Trek because
your mother
I didn't really
sort
pay
of
attention to it, but it was those
was
stories.
very
that
respectful
did
of
for me.
that, wasn't she? And I think she sort of drew that to your attention, didn't she? She made sure she went to at least one big Star Trek convention a year.
The short version is, you know, I went to conventions very young, but again, I still didn't care because Knight Rider was coming on tonight, and I was, you know, gonna see. No, I mean that's what it
Sure.
was. I didn't get it.
A talking car.
Yeah.
Your mom's the computer, and you watch a talking car.
I know. Yeah. Well, but what really did it was the part that she inspired me was she would get there and she wouldn't go and sign with the other actors. She would go to her table and she would sign. And what I was always very impressed that she did at conventions is that she would interact.
The time with.
And she would spend 2, 3, 4 hours there signing and then talking to people.
Yeah, God bless.
And it was nice. And it wasn't just a transaction.
Yeah.
And
Just
so,
like Bill.
yeah, you said it. I was always very proud
He'll
to
never
see her do that. And then my father, the few times they'd ever go to anything or speak on stage, he didn't disappear behind the curtain. He would get down off stage and talk to people. So they were very human, and they kind of fought for, they knew the fans are the ones that saved Star Trek.
Mm.
And they never took that for granted.
God bless.
And I think every opportunity they had, they did what they could to thank the fans or at least be humans with
You're
them.
right.
Well, your presence is very impactful at especially in Vegas and any convention you go to. And when did that start?
My presence.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I've been seeing the same Vegas one. I've been going.
Delina.
My eyes are up here.
What was your Star Trek? What were you like
I
before?
knew what
Star
I was
Trek?
getting into. I'd watched the show as a kid. If I'm truthful, I had walked away from it as a young adult in my teen years. I was not interested in Doctor Who anymore or Star Trek. But as a child, as an 8, 9, 10-year-old, I was mad for Star Trek.
Really?
Yeah.
So you're one of the smart ones.
Yeah. I think it was more of an adventure show more than anything else. I'm not sure I, was hearing an ethos or a tenet that, a societal, message, but I just love the colors, and the fact it was in space, and they did this thing called beaming up, and there were a lot of chiffon-clad ladies, which was very, very interesting to a young man. But like I say, I'd wandered off by the time I was, 13, 14, 15. So getting cast on it, that was as Connor said, I mean, it was a bloody good job to get cast on, because it looked like it was a sure thing for 7 years. And
at least for that year.
At least, we knew we weren't just making a pilot.
Yeah.
We were getting a run. And we were at Paramount, man, when it was still an incredible, one of the old timey studios. And those stages and all its history, the whole damn thing was, I just pinched myself. They were halcyon salad days, and they really were. And I'm eternally grateful.
And you guys had a great crew too. I mean, it seems like all the shows had a great crew. I wasn't really there, but I mean, every story
Scott
I hear,
was,
but everyone's sort of a
mensch.
family member there. Sure, there's maybe little squabbles, but you guys come together as a family all the
it was
time.
incredibly friendly
They've
set.
been together for like 17 years.
There was a
By the time
hardcore
we
of
got
them,
to them.
about 20 of them.
We were coming onto their show.
Yeah, we were.
Right.
But they opened their arms to us,
Absolutely.
and they treated us with all the respect of stars arriving at a new show, which was quite heady.
Yeah.
And Marvin got impatient with me once or twice.
Probably for good reason.
Yeah.
Looking back on it.
Fucking around, Dominic.
Dominic.
But I mean, without a doubt, they were the best, some of the best years of my acting life and of my life in general. as Connor, iterated, going to the conventions and seeing, I remember going to FedCon early on and stepping out in front of 10,000 people, man. It was like being in a boy band.
Yeah. And those German fans.
Yeah.
They love
went,
Star
they
Trek.
went
Yeah.
for it.
They
Yeah.
love Star
I'm
Trek.
pretty damn sure I took my shirt off.
Attaboy.
Give them what they want.
Attaboy.
At the final one, I mean, God bless, they pushed me and Leonard out, who was on one of his last hurrahs, really, to represent the first and last of Star Trek.
The final what?
Our last hurrah.
Oh, yeah.
We'd been cancelled,
Mhm.
and they pushed me and him out to represent the first and last in front of another huge crowd there. And God bless him, he hasn't got a clue who I was.
Bittersweet. Yeah,
But he put his arm around me and walked me out to the center of the stage, and then told that story for the first time with where he got that from.
Oh, yeah.
From being at
I'm still
at Temple.
sure to my soul that George has no idea who I am.
George. Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
He'll say hi to you and give you a hug, and I'll say, hey, George. And you're like, hello.